Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here. Today I'm going to be talking about a game that was played in I think it was the Baden-Baden tournament. Grenke? I don't know how to pronounce that. It's hosted in Germany. Super tournament. Lots of good players. In this game we have world champion Magnus Carlsen playing his, let's say, defeated buddy in Viswanathan Anand. They just completed their world championship match just a couple months ago, more than a few months ago. And, I mean, Magnus is the world champion. Beat Anand pretty convincingly. And, well, let's see what happened in this game, guys. Let's see if Anand can get revenge. In this game, we have Anand playing white and Magnus playing black. In this game, Anand starts with d4. This is the fourth round of the tournament, if I'm not mistaken, guys. Magnus is on an even score, and so is Anand. I think Anand has drawn all of his games so far. So both players are pretty, I would say, in an urgent situation to try and win games at this point. So we start with d4, and today Magnus started out with f5. This is no coincidence, by the way. Man, I just phrased that wrong. It's just a coincidence that I'm talking about again, though, that someone played f5 and with f5 and while playing the Dutch, and well, that may have influenced my decision to do this game, cover this game. So we get a normal Dutch defense, the Fiend Shadow variation, and I guess I'm a little bit surprised that Magnus went for e6. Normally the main move with g6 is definitely more dynamic and more popular, as with e6 it's a bit hard to get dynamic play in this kind of position. This is the main line of the Stonewall Dutch, and white has a lot of options in this kind of position. I think one idea you can try is knight c3, or queen c2, knight c3. Let's put this kind of sample continuation on the board, or rook b1, whatever it is, and then followed by b4 in this kind of position. I think that's one very aggressive idea that white always has in mind. But in this game, b3 was played, and the idea is to basically allow bishop a3 to try and exchange the dark squared bishops, a very understandable strategic decision that white is trying to make. So queen e7 is the main line here, and from here I think I've seen bishop b2 followed by queen c1 in this position, still trying to get bishop a3 in this position. That's one line, but lately black is doing quite fine in those kind of positions. So mainly they just go for knight e5 these days, I think, and that's what Anand is playing when black just castles, knight d2, and white's idea is to try to centralize and get a grip on the e5 and d4 squares, trying to get a grip on these dark squares. That's very central, pun unintended, central to white's plan. So we saw a5 by Carlsen, a little bit of a strange move, but his idea is simply to push the a-pawn, open the file for this rook over here. Once he takes on b3, he's basically gotten rid of his of a pretty useless pawn and activated his pieces better. Also notice that with the a-pawn here, you're potentially just not. You're also just controlling this b4 square. That's what you want to keep in mind. Maybe white's idea is to potentially expand with c5, b4, and a3, and with this pawn push, you're leaving yourself with one less weakness here on these a7 and b7 squares. Often white pawn races over there, gets into a pawn storm, and tries to take advantage of those weaknesses. Bishop b2, normal. Knight b7, just developing. Looks very, very normal. One other idea that black can definitely try, by the way, is bishop d7, and I don't know, if queen c2, the one idea is just to play bishop b8, then bring the knight here. That's also a plausible option. Also, knight a6 followed by knight b4 is certainly interesting too. b6, this kind of stuff, b6, knight a6, and c5, these are very common in the Stonewall. So let's see, we have bishop d7, and let's see, sorry about this, guys. Knight bd7 was played instead. Makes sense. Queen c2, very normal. And here Magnus plays the expected a4 move, just trying to undermine the pawn chain here. And I suppose the natural reaction that white has to definitely consider is just taking the pawn. And I think the main idea was that after knight e4, I think this was what Magnus was going to play. Anand probably would have just played this knight to f3, and probably after this, maybe he could take, but also c5 doesn't look that bad, and I'm sure he'll get the pawn back in a4. This pawn is just too weak on here in the a4 square. And there, a lot of the center is going to open up, and black should be well met in the center. I mean, he's well developed, and he's got a relatively safe king, even though the e5 square is a hole. So I don't think black is doing that badly. Also, instead of knight there, I mean, he can play preparatory moves, or possibly play knight b6 at some point once this bishop's gone, trying to get the pawn over here. So that's also another plausible option. But instead, Anand did not take. He just decided to play knight f3, another understandable move. But now, first Magnus centralizes, and the thing is, I'm not liking really Anand's next move. It looks a bit passive for my taste. I think by playing this move, Carlsen is closing the structure a bit to his liking. The move he plays is e3. This is played by Anand, and the thing is, you're allowing black to play a3 himself, and this pawn is just taking away this square, and it's kind of closing down the structure over here, closing down the hatches, if you will, on the queen side. And I don't really like this kind of configuration for white. I think that maybe white should consider this kind of takes, and after, I don't know, you can take an e5 or just play c5 again. We kind of get a transposition to the game position, and I think black is doing really fine in this kind of position. He can also think about f4. Maybe, I forgot to mention that, guys. f4, possibly trying to undermine the king side over here some way. Possibly if the tension somehow gets reduced here over here, or somehow this position stabilizes, maybe black can think about bringing all of his pieces towards the king side over here with even g5, as ridiculous as that seems. That's very common in the Stonewall Dutch. So we see e3. This is not the best move, I think. Again, taking on a4 is probably a better option, but okay, Anand is a world champion, so you can't blame him, even though it may be a slight mistake, because I guess he likes the following structure a lot. Because a3, bishop c3, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and bishop d7 is very, very solid for white and for black. But I mean, in retrospect, I think the other position type is better. So in this position, Anand plays knight takes d7. I should also mention, guys, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I'm using ChessBase a lot to check on these games. I'm not sure if you like this kind of format. I'm a little annoyed by how you can get these variations to just pop up and kind of be a spoil sport on what I'm going to be talking about. I like the chess.com live analysis board better. If you have any advice on how to get rid of this variation mode, this text box right over here, I don't know what do you call this option box, that'd be cool if you could tell me. So I'm trying to figure it out myself, but bishop d7 is very solid for black, and the thing is, I don't really like Anand's next move. I think he should just play like rook ac1 or play bishop e1, playing f3 to try to kick out this knight. He's got the bishops, he's got a little bit more space in the center, although black, is well developed and solid. So I think both sides have their play. I just don't like Anand's next move, just trading off this good knight for black's bad bishop. Strategically, this kind of makes sense because he's closing the position for c5, and he knows that he's going to be playing. Anand knows that he's going to be playing f3, forcing this knight back to a bad square. So black, after bishop c7, let's see if I can find it. There we go, b4. After this, b4. I'm sure white has a lot of space, but the problem is black is going for really, really a strong kingside play with h5, and this bishop along this diagonal is really peering down on the white king, and you can always kind of picture that g5 might be coming actually in this position. I mean, this is not so far-fetched, I think. Instead of b4, I mean, d4 is probably a good move actually, but I mean, I don't know. I just don't like white's position because his bishop here on c3 doesn't make much sense, and the g2 bishop, while being the structurally good bishop, is pretty inactive at the moment. So I prefer black in this kind of position a lot. And after bishop e1, the retreating move playing f3, e5 was played, and I think that the position is kind of opening up, and black now he has his three pawns here in the center. That's very, very nice looking, to be honest. And we saw the pawn captures the pawn here. White can also play f3, and we certainly get almost a transposition, I think. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the rook would move here. Hard to say what white would do. Maybe b5. A lot of options, but one thing you don't want to allow is b5 followed by e4 when the structure is totally closed, and this is such a bad bishop here on the e1 square, so this is obviously good for black. So I mean, white has to be a little bit careful not to allow a closed structure. So instead, he just decided to take, and after bishop takes, the rook has to move since it's under attack on a1. And we saw the queen centralizing on e6. He just wants to get out of this file that's opposing the rook right over here. That makes a lot of sense, and it's a pretty nice position for Magnus, I think, for black. It's still roughly equal, but somewhere in the complications here, I think Anand is just losing the grip on the position. The natural move with f3 was played by Anand, and knight f6 was played. Very, very normal stuff. I don't see anything wrong so far. Bishop h3, attacking the f5 pawn. Black has to defend it. And now somewhere around here, I suppose that Anand is going wrong. Maybe he went wrong earlier, so it's hard to say if he miscalculated or something, but he missed one of Magnus's ideas here in this kind of position. His idea, so what Anand played was e4, opening up the position. Notice that this bishop is bearing down on this queen, so it kind of makes sense to put a pawn here and try to maintain the tension in this kind of position. Notice that black can't recapture once more here on the e4 square due to this pin on the queen. So this is actually what happened, but the problem is Magnus finds a very strong and powerful move in this position to solve all of this problem. He plays the move bishop b2, and the idea pretty much is just to grab the pawn over here on the a2 square. White really doesn't have any other options but to just capture on f5. I mean, there's not really much else white can do in this position to protect the pawn. Notice that you don't really want to play queen b1, because now that you've moved this bishop off the e5 square, I've got three attackers on that pawn right over there, and that pawn is gone. So white pretty much has to take. There's no other option, and now black just grabs on the a2 square. And we've got this threat of bishop d4 in the midst, so either you've got to move the king, or you've got to place a piece on one of these two dark squares here on the f2 or e3 squares. And in this case, Anand just decides to play bishop f2, properly guarding this diagonal. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. And now the thing is, you don't want to allow white to play f takes g6 in this position and leave yourself with an open king right over here. Notice that black has pushed a lot of pawns, has no pawn sheltered right now for his king, and he needs to close this position a lot. So I think Magnus is playing a great move next in g5. Now this pawn is blockaded by this knight right over here. So it's just a very nice configuration. And notice that the bishops just don't have any scope in this kind of position. I'm not really sure what black can really do. White really can do against this. Maybe bishop e3 to attack this pawn right over here. But I think that after rook a e8. This bishop's under attack, and you can't really take because of bishop d4. Notice that you just left this diagonal, so you can't. It's not really on to play this bishop e3, trying to attack this pawn really. So you got to be a little bit more careful. And after g5, what ended up happening was Anand just played rook fe1, trying to bring his rook down to the 7th rank. He's got to get active, and although his bishop right here in the h3 and f2 squares aren't active, at least maybe he can get his rook active and get some counterplay against black's a pawn, which is extremely dangerous at the moment. Magnus brought the queen back. He's got to bring some protection around the king and prepare this pawn push by moving the queen also. You can also see the bishop somewhat moving back eventually and trying to push the a pawn, but at the moment this kind of configuration with the pawn here and the bishop here always protecting each other is extremely solid for black, and this is very tough to defend for white. Anand just played the most active move, rook e6. That's pretty much trying to double on the e file, I think, or potentially bring the queen right over here to the e2 square. That's white's idea, I think. And now we see black. Basically, Magnus has calculated this really far in advance. Let's just say that. Knight g4 is certainly one possibility to bang down the hatches, attack the f5 pawn, and just basically just try to grab as much as you can. Another move in this kind of position, I think black could play is rook f e8 and challenge this rook over here, and probably after rook d1, black could play probably just takes. Yeah, probably just takes, and queen e7 looks normal. Queen g7 also looks fine. You know, black's doing extremely fine in this kind of position. I don't see the problem here for black at all. Maybe it's because of the f5 square that Magnus is worried about in this line. But certainly he doesn't even have to take the rook right here. He can also just play knight g4, and I don't know what white's idea is in this kind of position other than taking, and well, probably you can reduce the position off to trade off. Well, black's idea is to trade off the major pieces. If he gets the rooks off, this pawn is rolling, and it is going to promote home immediately, probably. I don't really know what white is doing in this position, so this looks potentially really good, actually, for black. Anyways, after rook e6, what we just saw is knight g4 straight up, and the same kind of structure as, but black hasn't played the rook over here, and white hasn't committed the rook to the e file yet either. The only thing I don't like about this position is that white can get this check on g6, but Magnus is just a beast at calculating. He has calculated this to the end, essentially, knowing that king h7 is pretty much getting into this diagonal, but he's got a concrete idea against this. The best move that white has in this position probably is rook e6. What happened in the game is that Anand is just blundering the game away immediately with rook d7, unfortunately. What white should do is rook e6, but I mean, after this, I think the idea was that maybe black play rook f e8 and attack this rook, and if we kind of get the same kind of idea in this position, notice that the rook is attacked, this rook has to do something, or maybe the rook has to be defended by this rook. Black would just stabilize the position with bishop f6, and this is pretty much dead for white. I mean, the pass pawn is just going to be pushed, so maybe queen a2 to blockade it, but I don't know. Maybe bishop b2 now, because now the queen is kind of offside here in this kind of position. I have no idea what white is going to do in this kind of position. I don't think rook takes e6 is on because the queen takes a2, and this kind of transformation is not beneficial for white, I think. And the pass pawn is extremely dangerous. In fact, it's already promoting, I think, and black should win by material alone. That's a really problematic position. But I mean, that's probably the best that white has. I mean, he can also consider a move like b5 in this kind of position, trying to open things up after rook f8. But I mean, this is a pretty dire position. What the thing is that this doesn't immediately lose like in the game. But the thing is, after rook d7, I guess what Anand missed was that Magnus can just take the rook, and after f6, trying to gain a discovery. I guess Anand's idea was that if black plays rook here, he gets this check, and the queen comes in on the g6 squares and checkmates black. So I guess that's what he was hoping for, a small trick. But after f6, Magnus just plays queen d1, sacrifices the whole queen. But his idea is that I'm attacking your queen, and your queen has to take. I take your rook, and I've won material with the queen versus two rooks battle. But more importantly, the pass pawn over here cannot be stopped. The king just goes to h6, and it's just totally safe in this kind of configuration against the bishop and queen here. So after queen d3, king h6, h4, takes here, white just resigned, as there's just no way to even possibly check in this position. Not even maybe in 3 moves you could, but even then you really can't check at all in this position, or try to perpetual check in this kind of position. So white's actually dead. So Magnus won, and I think this is a good victory for him. Just rebounding. I mean, he didn't have the greatest year last year rating wise, but I think so far after winning the Wykenze tournament, if I'm not mistaken, and he's in contention again in this tournament. I think he's going to be rebounding this year since he's playing so well so far. For Anand, I mean, this is just I'm not sure what to say about it. I mean, this is just a disappointing game. I mean, at this point, I don't know. I mean, if I was Anand, I'd be pretty salty about things. To to be honest, and had to get frustrated by losing to Magnus all the time, given the World Championship, but that's just me. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I'll make sure to fix my audio eventually, but see you around.